Hello everybody, this is Courtney with Fiber Fox Studios and welcome to another Mosaic Monday. I am going to teach you guys this really beautiful chevron stitch. I'm calling it the Chic chevron. The pattern is available in my Etsy store for a very minimal purchase, and it's a chart. It's actual just a crochet chart, not really a pattern. There's no written instructions, but I do have videos on how you can go about reading those charts. But the chart will take you through doing the repeat on this to make a really beautiful project. The pink and gray that I have shown right here is actually a pillow that I'm working on, and it's going to be two-sided. I'm going to do a different color on the other side and then do a border when I go to join them up. So this is just one of the many things that you can do with this particular stitch. You definitely could do an entire project out of this, and you could be switching colors a lot more. Right here in this sample, as well as the other one that I just showed, I'm only using 2 colors. But technically with this particular design, you could actually change color every single row and it would give you a really beautiful look. Or you could also change color by selecting one color A, which for me is going to be the gray, and then your color B could be multiple colors. So you could do a gradient effect, you could do a rainbow effect, all different kinds of things. We're going to jump right into working on this project. We're going to get started by choosing our yarn. Today I'm going to be working in 2 different colors so that you guys will be able to see what I'm doing. You of course are going to choose as many colors as you would like, and you're going to follow along with me. For time purposes, I'm going to assume that you do know how to do mosaic crochet, that you've watched my other tutorials, so you're familiar with the way that I teach it, so we can kind of speed through the rows and hopefully keep this tutorial under 40 minutes. But we'll go ahead and get started, and so grab your crochet hook and at least 2 colors of yarn, and let's start. Who are interested in the yarn that I am using? The yarn I'm using today is going to be this Stylecraft Special DK. So it's the double knit that Stylecraft has out on the market. The color is silver in this particular yarn. So this is going to be my color A for my project, and then my color B is going to be this Hayfield Bonus DK Extra Value, and I got both of these yarns at Daremore's, and I'll have a link down below in the description, not only to my Etsy shop but to Daremore's as well, for those of you who might be interested in purchasing. I am not affiliated in any way, shape, or form, but I happen to love them, and that's just where I found these yarns. So this blue yarn it doesn't have a color name, it's a shade on these, and it's shade 0824 for those who are interested. So we're going to start out by chaining with color A. So you're going to grab your color A and you're going to begin doing the starting chain for this project in a multiple of 28 plus 3 at the end. So 28 stitches, as many times over as you would like, and then add 3 stitches to the end. So since I'm just doing a swatch, I'm going to chain a total of 28 stitches, and then I'm going to add 3 to that end. You guys can do the same on your side. Also down in the description there are some different project ideas with the counts for those of you who may want to do a blanket, the throw pillow, purses, beach bags, baby blankets, table runners, cushions. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do with this, and I've got a few different ideas down below in the description for you. So let's pause here and come back to me when you have your desired chain ready. So for whatever size project you're going to do, come back and meet up with me when you are ready to move on to row number 1. And we are back, and I have a chain of 31 to start out with, so that's 28 plus 3 chains. So I'm doing a very small swatch that's going to end up being about the size of this piece right here. I will tell you guys how to continue on for the larger size projects as we go. So just keep that in mind. Just pay attention and watch the entire video. I will lead you through it. You do not have to go and purchase the charts to learn how to do this. I'm going to teach you right here on this tutorial. So now we're going to begin row 1. So we are still in color A. So you always are going to chain in the same color that you are starting row 1 with. So for row 1 and for all mosaics, we begin this row by doing a traditional single crochet to start the row. So one of our chains that we chained is a turning chain. So we're going to be skipping this very first chain right here on the row. So we never count the loop that's on our hook. We skip this very first chain and we're going to go right there to the second chain, and that's where we are going to be doing our traditional single crochet. So we're going to skip this stitch and come right here to the second and insert under the V. So you want to make sure that you're getting completely under both loops. And we're just going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop. Grab our yarn and pull through 2 to do a traditional single crochet. Now from here, the rest of the row repeat is a back loop only single crochet. So if you are new to Mosaic, the back loop only is going to go right here into the back loop. So this time we're not going under the V. We're just going to pick up the back loop only, and we are going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop, grab our yarn and pull through 2, and we have completed our first back loop only single crochet. So now we're going to do that all the way down the rest of the row, going into the back loop only. Now this is kind of hard to see, but we're just picking up one loop there in the back, and try not to stretch it out too much. I'm kind of exaggerating so you guys can see what I'm doing, but we're just doing a back loop only single crochet all the way down. And then the very last stitch in your row is always going to be a traditional single crochet, and that is super important. So pause here. Finish working your back loop only single crochet all the way down the row, and meet back up with me when you have one stitch left here on row 1, and we will do that together. And we are back, and we're here at the end of the row. We have one last stitch left to work into. So never confuse your knot as a stitch. That can happen. So if you tighten that up a little bit but not too much, it looks a little less like a stitch. So here we are at the end of the row. We're going to be going under the V again. So we want to make sure that we get under both loops. And we're going to do our traditional single crochet right here at the end of the row. And that is how you're going to end every single row. I'm not going to be showing row ends anymore throughout the rest of this. I'm not going to specifically show you, hey, do this, because you guys are going to need to rewind the video to continue on down if you're doing more than just a swatch. So now here we are at the end of row 1, and I have a total of 30 stitches left. I've just chained up 2 because we have to clip our yarn. So I like to bind off this way, and I'm going to clip my yarn. Now I pull that on through, and then I grab the tail that I've just created, place my thumb and index right above those 2 chains, and I'm going to push and cinch down as I pull back on that tail to create that little knot. That is how I like to bind off. If you've been watching me, you probably already know that. So now we're going to begin on row number 2. Sorry about that, bumped the camera. And we're going to be inserting right here into the first V. It's really important that you do not try to work in to that turning chain. If you are uncertain about which is the stitch to start in, all you need to do is put your nail on it. If it moves down, that's a turning chain and not where you're going to work. Now that I've scooted that down, we can see the V right here. So this is where we're going. So we're going to insert under the V, because this is our row 2 start. We're going to make sure that we're going under our V. Now we're going to be adding on color B this time. So we are switching colors, and I'm going over to color B. For me, that is the blue color. And we're going to just do that by adding a little slip knot onto our hook, tighten that down, and then all we need to do is draw up that loop And then I like to grab tail and working yarn, but it's completely up to you. We want to just grab our yarn and do one chain. Now we want to let that tail fall. And we're going to go back down into the same exact stitch. So we want to make sure we're going into that same stitch. And we're going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop. Grab our yarn and pull through two to finish out our traditional single crochet. Now the repeat for row 2 is exactly the same as what we did back on row 1. We're going to be doing those back loop only single crochet. So we're going to go right there into the very next stitch. Grab and pull up a loop, grab and pull through 2, and we're going to do a back loop only single crochet into each and every stitch all the way down this row. When you get to the very last stitch in your row, you will then do your traditional single crochet. So we're going to keep working the exact same manner all the way down, grabbing back loop only each and every time, back loop only single crochet in each and every stitch. So pause here and meet back up with me when you're ready to move on to row 3. And here we are back at the end of row 2. This is what your work is going to be looking like. Nothing too much right now, but we're going to switch back over to color A. We're going to join on. We're going to make sure that we're going into that very first stitch. So we want to look for the V. We want to just push down this little side turning chain. This side chain is a turning chain is what I'm trying to say. And it can look like a stitch, but it is not. So if you are uncertain about where to start these rows, if you're having trouble identifying it, my best tip to you is to get a stitch marker and place that in once you do your chain, and that way you know always where to work your first stitch. So we're going to insert right here into the first stitch of the row, going under the V. So I'm going to make sure we're completely under that V. Now we're going to add on color A. So color A for me is the gray color. And we're going to pull up that loop. And then we're going to grab both the working yarn and the tail, or you can just grab your working yarn, either way. Chain 1. Now we're going to go back down into that same exact stitch. So we want to make sure we're going into the same stitch. And we're going to let that tail fall out of the way. And we're going to finish our traditional single crochet. So for those of you who are struggling finding that first stitch, it would be at this point that you would go ahead and insert a stitch marker. You've made one stitch. You know that this is the first stitch. Put the stitch marker in there, and you will be able to see. So you'll always know where your very first stitch is. So for row number 3, we're going to begin the mosaic work now. And our repeat is going to begin immediately. We're going to start in the very next stitch doing our repeat. So we're going to begin the repeat by doing one back loop only single crochet. So we're going to go right here into this next stitch. And we're going to do one back loop only single crochet. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochet. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook. We're going to identify the very next stitch. We're going to slide directly down and find our little bump. We're going to pick that up. We're going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop. We're going to grab our yarn and pull through 2. Grab our yarn and pull through 2. That's our first drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the very next stitch with a second drop down double crochet. And now we all know from doing the other videos, if we're not sure where our very next stitch is, we can always fold our work back. We should have 2 stitches back here. When we put these back in place, the double crochets, they are covering those 2 stitches. So now we're going to begin doing 4 back loop only single crochets. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're now going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here. one in each of the next 2 stitches. So we're going to do 2 in a row. So there's 1 drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do our second right here in the next stitch. And now we're going to continue on by doing 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. 1, here's 2, number 3, and number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets over the next 2 stitches. So here's our very next stitch. Slide down and find that little bump, and then finish out our drop down double crochet. And remember, you're going to keep nice loose tension when you're doing those drop downs so we don't draw up that loop. We're going to do our second drop down double crochet. And now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. Three and 4. Now we do 2 drop down double crochets right here over the next 2 stitches. So we're going to go ahead and wrap our yarn, slide down, find that little bump, 2 rows below, and finish out that drop down double crochet. Here's 1. Here is number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. There's 1. Here's 2. Here's number 3 and number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over the next 2 stitches. There's 1, and here's number 2. Now we're going to end our repeat with 1 back loop only single crochet into the very next stitch. So for those of you doing a larger swatch, your repeat began over here with this first back loop only single crochet, and it ends over here with a back loop only single crochet. So if you are starting and continuing on down a longer one, you're going to start back over with the back loop only single crochet, the 2 drops, 4 back loop, 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 2 drops, and then 1 back loop. Then you'll start over again. So keep working that exact same manner all the way down the rest of your row. I will have row times, the start time for each row down below in the description to help you. So if you need to see this repeat again, just refer down to the description and you'll be able to tap on the blue, I believe is how it shows up. It's the timestamp. You'll be able to tap on that and it'll take you right to that time in the video to watch this all over again. So for the rest of us, if you're doing a swatch with me, you can go ahead and do your traditional single crochet right there in the last stitch, and we will chain up 2 to bind off. So we're going to move on to row number 4. And we're back. We are going to move on to row number 4. So we are joining on with color B. So we're switching back to color B for this row. And I was asked this question the other day. For my mosaic technique, the way you know what color to do is you're doing the opposite of whatever you just did. So if you have just used gray, you switch back to blue in my case. So we're just going to go into that very first stitch in the row. We're going to chain 1. We're going to go back down into that very first stitch. And we're going to pull up our loop. We're going to grab and pull through 2 to do our traditional single crochet yet again. And now our repeat for this row begins right now. We're going to begin with 1 drop down double crochet right here into the very next stitch. So we're going to identify our next stitch, slide down 2 rows below and find that little bump. Pick that up. That's what we want. Pick up that little bump and finish out our drop down double crochet, keeping nice loose tension. So there is our first stitch of the repeat. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. So go right here into the very next stitch, and like I said before, if you're not sure, make sure you fold back your double crochet. You'll have 1 stitch behind it or 2 depending on how many double crochets you've done, and when you cover it back up, the stitch it covers, we know that the very next one is right there beside it. So we're just going to do our back loop only single crochet, total of 4 of those over the next 4 stitches. So there's number 2, here is number 3, and here is number 4. And now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets into the next 2 stitches. So we're going to identify the very next stitch. We're going to do our drop down double crochet, dropping down 2 rows below and picking up that bump. Now we're going to grab and pull up the loop. We're going to grab and pull through 2, grab and pull through 2. Now we're going to do our second drop down double crochet right here into the very next stitch. So we're going to grab and pull up a loop, grab and pull through 2, grab and pull through 2. And now we need to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. And I am unfortunately having to untangle some yarn. So now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. There's 1. Now we're going to do our second back loop only single crochet, third back loop only single crochet, fourth back loop only single crochet. Now we need to do 2 drop down double crochets, so we identify our very next stitch, slide down to just 2 rows below, directly down, pick up that loop, and finish out our drop down double crochet. Here's number 1. Now we need to do number 2. Now we're going to do 2 back loop only single crochets over the next 2 stitches. It's just 2 back loop this time. There's 1. Here's 2. And then we need to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over the next 2 stitches. There's 1, and here's number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. So we're going to go into the very next stitch, picking up the back loop only, and do our back loop only single crochet. There's 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. And here's number 4. And now we need to do 2 drop down double crochets over the next 2 stitches. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook. We're going to identify our very next stitch, and we're just going to slide down 2 rows below and pick up that loop. Now we're going to finish out our drop down double crochet. There's number 1. Now I need to do a second one. Let's go right here and find our very next stitch, and finish out our second drop down double crochet. And now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. So there's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3, number 4. And now we need to end our repeat with 1 drop down double crochet right here into the very next stitch. And that ends our repeat. So to continue on down, you're going to come back over here to where our repeat began at the 1 drop down double crochet. Then we do 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 2 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, and 1 drop down double crochet. So that's your repeat from here to here, represents your repeat all the way down the rest of your row. So you can pause here and meet back up with me when you are ready to move on to row number 5. Remember, the very last stitch in your row when you get to the end is always going to be a traditional single crochet going under both loops, just like so. We're back and we're ready to move on to row number 5. I've already gone into the very first stitch in the row, and I have color A on my hook ready to draw up that loop. Now we're going to chain 1, and we're going to go back down into the same exact stitch, and we're going to do our traditional single crochet right here in the first stitch of the row, just like always. And now we're going to begin the repeat for row number 5, and the repeat for row number 5 begins with 3 back loop only single crochets over these next 3 stitches. So we're just going to go right there, back loop only, and do our first back loop only single crochet. So there's number 1, here is number 2, and here is number 3. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets over these next 2 stitches. So we're going to go right here to the very next stitch and do a drop down double crochet, nice loose tension. Going to go right here into the very next stitch, identify that bottom little loop down there 2 rows below, and finish out that drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. So going right there into the very next stitch with a back loop only. There's 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Oops, don't drop your stitch. And here's number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over the next 2 stitches. So right here we're going to identify our very next stitch. We're going to slide down 2 rows below and find that little bump, and we're going to pick that up and finish out our drop down double crochet. There's number 1, and here is number 2. Now we're going to do 6 back loop only single crochets over the next 6 stitches. So we're going to work all the way across this section right here. So we're going to do 1 back loop only single crochet. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Number 4. Number 5, and number 6. And now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. Identify your next stitch, slide down 2 rows below, find that little bump, go ahead and pick that up and finish up your drop down double crochet. There's number 1, and here's number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. Here's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets over the next 2 stitches. Here's number 1, nice loose tension, so that goes right back into place. And here's number 2. And now we're going to do 3 back loop only single crochets to end this repeat. So there's 1, here's 2, and here's number 3. And now for those of you that end your repeat, so if you are wanting to start your repeat again, you're going to be going back here to the beginning of the row, and our repeat begins with the 3 back loop only single crochets right here. It continues with the 1 drop or 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drops, 6 back loop only single crochets, 2 drops, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, and then 3 back loop only single crochets. So you will have another section that looks exactly like this when you continue on down your row, because these 3 here at the beginning of the repeat and the 3 at the end of the repeat create this section right here, if that helps anyone kind of to break that up. So you're going to pause here. Remember, the row start times are down in the description if you need to see this repeat again so that you can continue on down your work. And you're going to pause here. We'll meet back up when you're ready to move on to row number 6. We're back and we're ready to move on to row number 6. We're going to be joining on right here, finding that very first V. And remember, if you can scoot it down, it is a turning chain, and that is not where you work into. So we want to make sure that we go under that V, and we are going to join on this time with color B. And color B for me is the blue color. And we're going to grab and pull up that loop. We're going to grab and chain 1, and then we're going to go back down in that same exact stitch, and we're going to grab and pull up a loop and grab and pull through 2 to finish out our traditional single crochet. Now our repeat for this row begins immediately. We're going to be doing 1 back loop only single crochet right here to start our repeat. The repeat starts with 1 back loop only single crochet. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets over these next 2 stitches. So we're going to identify our next stitch, slide down the 2 rows below and pick up that loop right there. Finish out our first drop down double crochet. Now we need to do a second drop down double crochet right here, the very next stitch. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. So there's 1, here's number 2, number 3, and number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. Number 2. That's number 1, and we have to do 2. Here's number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. So there's number 1. Here's number 2, number 3, and number 4. And now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. So we're going to go right there into the center, or drop down 2 rows below, I mean. We're in the center of this shape. And we're going to do our 2 drop down double crochets. There's number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. There's 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Here's number 4. And now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. Here's number 1 drop down double crochet, and here is number 2 drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. So there's 1, here's number 2, here's number 3, and here's number 4. Now we need to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. So we're going to do number 1, number 2, and right here ends our repeat with 1 back loop only single crochet. So let's recap that repeat. So our repeat begins over here with 1 back loop only single crochet right here, and then we do 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 1 back loop only single crochet. So this is what your work's going to be looking like after you've finished up row number 6. And we're back for row number 7. I've switched over to color number, or color A, color number, but I've switched over to color A, and I've already joined on with the traditional single crochet in the very first stitch of the row. We're going to begin our repeat right away. So our repeat for this row begins with 1 drop down double crochet right here into the very next stitch. So we are just going to slide down 2 rows below, pick up that loop, grab and pull through 2, grab and pull through 2 to finish out a drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. So there's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3, here is number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here into these next 2 stitches. So we're just going to slide down 2 rows below and grab up that loop, the whole loop, and we're going to finish out our drop down double crochet. There's number 1, and we have a second one right here right beside it. There is number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. Just going to grab and pull up a loop and pull through 2. There's number 1. Here is number 2. Here is number 3. And number 4. And now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here into these very next 2 stitches. So we're just going to slide down 2 rows below, find that little bump right there, and pick that up and finish out our drop down double crochet. There's 1. Now we have a second one that we're going to do right there next to it. So there's number 2. Now we're going to do 2 back loop only single crochets over these next 2 stitches. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. Here's number 1. And here's our second drop down double crochet. Number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over the next 4 stitches. So there's 2. Here's number 3. And here's number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets over these next 2 stitches. So there is number 1. And here is number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. There's 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. And here's number 4. And then our repeat ends with 1 drop down double crochet right here in the very next stitch. So let's recap that repeat again. Our repeat begins over here with 1 drop down double crochet, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 2 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 1 drop down double crochet. So you're going to start again with this drop down double crochet and repeat this all the way down, and you're going to start seeing your peaks and your valleys that you're creating by doing this. So you're just going to rewind back to the beginning of the row if you need, and remember down in the description, row start times are down there, and complete this full repeat all the way down the rest of your row. Meet back up with me when you are ready to move on to row number 8. So please pause here, and we'll be back in just a moment to move on to row number 8. We're back and we're ready to move on to row number 8. I'm going to be switching over to color B, which is blue for me, but I just wanted to show you guys this is what your work's going to be looking like. Hopefully it's going to be looking more like this. Hopefully you're doing a larger project, and it would be looking more like this one right here, where we have the full peaks and valleys. We're doing this section over here. So when you keep repeating, you end up doing the center and over here to the end. I've got 3 repeats of the pattern on this particular swatch that I'm showing you. That's my pillow that I'm working on. So let's move on to row number 8 now. So we are joining on, as I said, with color B, and we're going to do that right there in the very first stitch of the row. Remember that stitch marker. If you're having trouble, always use your stitch marker here, and just remember this little side bump right here is not where we want to work our stitch. So if you keep being tempted to work into this, remember, slide it down with your nail. It will move. Your first stitch in the row will not move. So we're going to insert underneath both of those loops, and we're going to join on with our yarn. I have an extremely tiny tail right now. Recommend definitely a longer tail than that. We're just going to draw up that loop, and then we're going to grab our yarn and chain 1. Now we want to go back down into that same exact chain or stitch. We're going to go back down that same exact stitch, draw up a loop, and finish out our traditional single crochet. So now for row number 8, our repeat is going to begin immediately. We're going to do 3 back loop only single crochets over these next 3 stitches. So our repeat for row 8 begins now with our first back loop only single crochet. So there's number 1. Now we're going to do number 2. And last but not least, number 3. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets over these next 2 stitches. So just going to slide down, find that little bump, and pick that up. Finish out our drop down double crochet, number 1. And then we have to do 1 more. We're doing 2 of these, just like we've been doing them. There's number 2. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. So there's number 1. Here's number 2. Number 3. And number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. So we're going to go ahead and do our first drop down double crochet. There's number 1. And here's number 2. Now we're going to do 6 back loop only single crochets over this whole section right here. So we're going to work straight across just like we've done before. So we're going to do 6 back loop only single crochets. So there's 1. Here's number 2. It's number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. And now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. Here's number 1 drop down double crochet, and here is number 2 drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. There's 1. Here's 2. Here's 3. And here's number 4. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches. Drop down and pick up that loop. There's 1. Here's 2. Now we're going to do 3 back loop only single crochets to end our repeats. There's 1. Here's 2. And here's 3. So we're going to recap that repeat. Try not to split your yarn. So we are going to go over that one more time. So our repeat begins over here with 3 back loop only single crochets. Then we do 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 6 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets, and our repeat ends with 3 back loop only single crochets. So again, same as I explained before, you're going to start back over here with these 3. So you're working another section that looks like this when you start back over. So you're going to keep working the 3 all the way through to these 3 till the end of your row. And then from there, you're able to rewind this video back to row 3 and begin back on row 3. And you're going to work row 3 through 8 over and over and over to build your swatch up so that it is something like what my swatch shown, where it's row after row after row. So you're going to rewind the video back to row number 3. I have triple checked this. Row 3 is where it is at. So you will repeat row 3 through 8 in this video to make a larger swatch like the pink one that's photographed and shown throughout the video. So As always, I appreciate you guys for watching. Please make sure that you give this video a thumbs up. Please make sure that you check out some of my other content. Watching those ads helps me out greatly. And always leaving a comment is also a great way, along with that thumbs up, to help support the channel. And I do appreciate it so much. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave me a comment down below, and I'll be happy to help you. Until next time, bye for now.